We're good.
Okay, thanks, Eric. We appreciate it. And Vanessa, you're good on your side over there?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And we will call to order the regularly scheduled quarterly meeting of the Lawrence County Retirement Board. Today is Tuesday, August 15, 2023. Would ask if you have any type of an electronic communication device, if you please put it on silent or vibrate. And we always start with Pledge of Allegiance and ask that you remain standing for a moment of silence. Mr. Prestipine, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. We'll have a moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. Vanessa, would you call the roll, please?
Deputy Treasurer Chalala. Here. Controller Prestipine.
Here.
Commissioner Spielvogel.
Here.
Commissioner Buick.
Present.
Commissioner Vogler.
Here. We have a quorum. All 5 members are here. I will note that the Treasurer Rapone, from what I understand, has some very good news, a new grandchild, and we congratulate him and hope everybody's happy and healthy. But Deputy Treasurer Melissa Chalala is joining us today, and we're glad to have you. Appreciate your joining us. We have no members of the public in the audience. I'll move us then down to the minutes of the last meeting, which was on June 6th, and I give my colleagues a moment or two to look them over, and then whenever you're ready, I can take a motion to adopt the minutes.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Any comments or questions about the minutes? We'll do a quick roll call, please.
Deputy Treasurer Chalala.
Yes.
Controller Prestipine.
Yes.
Commissioner Spielvogel.
Yes.
Commissioner Buick.
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. Before we ask Sarah Wilson to give the update, I do want to give my 4 colleagues an opportunity in case they have any opening concerns or statements. Commissioner Spielvogel?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Controller Prestipine? Thank you. Deputy Treasurer Chalala? Thank you. And Commissioner Buick?
Nothing.
Okay, thank you so much. We're always happy to have Sarah Wilson with us from Marquette. And I think I looked over the documents. I think you have some good news to share with us. I hope I'm right.
We do.
I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Let's just jump into Exhibit 2. We'll just talk a little bit about the U.S. economy and what happened in the quarter, so we can just kind of get an understanding of what the performance looked like and how it affected some of the news here. When we look on page 10, we look at U.S. real GDP growth, and you can see it's slightly accelerated in the first quarter with real GDP growing at an annual rate of 2.4. While a slowdown in consumer spending was a headwind, strong business investment, state and local government spending supported economic activity. And when we look at that, we know in the summer, infrastructure, there's a lot of, road work and everything else happening there. When we talk about what's happened with the Consumer Price Index, CPI, it hit 3.2% in July. Compared with 3% in June. So, we'll keep on trying to get that number lower and lower. It did spike a little bit. Once again, food and prices were the largest contributor to last month's increase. Food at home prices increased 3.6 over the past 12 months, while food away from home, like at restaurants, increased 7% over that period. But remember, we're also traveling, it's vacation time as well. So when we look at that, we also talk about the increases drifted downwards. The news is price increases have drifted downwards from the height we experienced just last summer. A lot of people are still not feeling that. At one point they said, food prices were up 18%. I'm sure when we get to the grocery store, we're feeling it. But they are saying that it has come down a little bit. Transportation and airfares have been up at 9%. So at one point, year over year, we know last year when we saw this market being very unstable, we saw some rather ugly double-digit negative returns. We knew inflation had hit 9.1. There goes the Fed. They kept on raising and raising because we know that they're trying to get that 2%. It has gone down. Remember that 9.1% was the highest rate of prices increase since 1980s. And we know that we have seen a lot of that. When we look at what's going on page 11, when we look at household debt service payments, even with the Fed being aggressively hiking rates in the last 12 months, we've seen that, and we've seen mortgage rates go up. Remember, mortgage rates were so low that everybody who went in that bond period had 30-year. They said, why not? It's cheap. Let's do 30-year mortgages. So if you were in 30-year mortgages, you have not, 67% of those mortgage holders have not been affected by the rate increase. That is one good thing. But then when we go look at what's happening with debt, we also know that we're going to have, with those rates going up, we know that consumers are paying very heavy credit cards. 29% is legal now. Who would have thought that on a credit card? We looked at what's going to happen is everybody took out equity loans. Remember, when you take out an equity loan or you take a line of credit, you can spend it, you're going to get one rate, and it's going to go adjustable. So we are going to see some of that going on. One thing that we have seen, though, such as small corporations, rate hikes are likely impacting small corporations. And we'll talk about that because we look at the market, small, mid-cap, you've got a lot of it, some exposure to that. Bankruptcies through April are higher than the first 4 months of any year since 2010. And that's at the bottom of page 11. Look at that. So we've seen that corporations have actually, there's more bankruptcy filings. When we turn the page, we look at what's happening globally, because we should talk about that. You have exposure to global. Look at China. The growth within Europe has become increasingly divided, with service-driven economies continuing to grow, but a slow manufacturing recovery has pushed Germany into a technical recession. And we look where China has gone. Remember, China was so tight about all their COVID, the pandemic, they kind of locked everything down, almost kind of worked against them when we look at inflation. And I think this is a really interesting point. When China, while GDP grew 6.3 from a year earlier in June in China, most analysts had expected growth of slightly more than 7%. The overall unemployment rate, meanwhile, remained stable in June, but rose to a new record of 21.3 for people between the ages of 16 and 24. I don't think we measure unemployment that way. I just thought that was a really interesting statistic there. We go look at what's happened with the asset classes on 13. We look at U.S. equities for the trailing 12 months. We thought they were up 19%. For the quarter, they were up 8.4%. International and emerging, while they were in the positive, they did have a little bit of not as great of a return. We look at U.S. bonds, fixed income, yet again in negative territory. We look at what's happening with this market, with the Fed. Now, what's happened is the Fed's going to meet. We think they're going to hold tight. And then in January, when they have their next meeting for next year, the market has priced in, 50% of the market believes they will do consecutive 25 basis point cuts for the next consecutive 7 meetings. So while we flew down, we flew back up, we're going to flow back down. And that becomes very hard for a fixed income manager to go out and figure out what to hold. Because rates go down again, it's going to be harder to buy with new money. So they're going to get lower rates than what they have. We look at what's happened with commodities. We look at third down. Real estate, we're going to talk a little bit about real estate. Real estate was a really great place to be in last year. This year it's really struggled. It's commercial real estate. We've seen that. One of the reasons is with the interest rates being high, commercial real estate really does tend to kind of absorb some of that when we look at their returns. We'll just quickly look at the sectors. Economic sectors were mostly positive. Information technology, and this is where we're going to really see what's happened there. Remember in COVID, we talked about the 5 stocks moved the market up and moved it down. Now we've got the Super 7 stocks, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Apples, Telsa. So those are the ones that are actually moving most of the market. When we look at that, value suffered from underperformance of energy and financials. They say energy's gone down, gas prices have gone down. Most consumers really aren't feeling that because even as they've gone down, we always have the summer spike there. So value has protected you, we know that, and last year in a down market, you weren't as down as the market was, we're fine. When we see growth outperform, we know that maybe we're gonna get a little cut on the performance, you're still gonna have good performance, you're just not gonna have that exceeding, and we're comfortable with that. Now, in June, when we look at the largest US stocks have been considerable in 2023, 7 stocks, as I said, count for 67% of the S&P's 500 return. And that's why we also tend to have you in an index. When we look at large cap value and US equities, it makes sense for you to have an index fund over finding what manager is just gonna be able to go pick those 7 stocks before the rise and the fall. Now, what's happened with that, the outperform safe stocks, which are mostly mega caps, has driven the 6-month price of the NASDAQ 100 relative to the broad market to the second highest level over the past 15 years. But you take those stocks out, if you take out the 10 largest 10 stocks in the S&P, comprises 31% of the index, but it contributes just to 21% of the index trailing 12 months earning. So as fast as they're in favor, when you go really look at the earnings and everything, they're not driving the whole part of the market. Okay, let's talk about what you've done. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Okay, so we look at what you did for the quarter. We saw that you're at that is page 22. You finished June 30th at 92.9 million. At the end of July, you're at 94 million. It's back down a little bit. August has been down a little bit. You had a net investment gain of 3.2 million with a return of 3.5. Through the year, the fund returned 7.9 and had a net investment gain of 6.8. So you're hitting that actuarial assumption, which is great. For the trailing 3 years, and I thought this was important. This kind of captures COVID. It captures what happened last year in the market. You had an annualized return of 7.8. So you are hitting that actuarial return, and you had a net investment gain of 20.5 million. We saw that your global manager, Dodge & Cox and MFS, outperformed. Underperformance by your active equity manager, Artisan. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. We replaced your non-US equity manager, Wellington. We did that. They came in, they had a change in portfolio management. We meet every week on the OCI committee, voted then, got rid of them that day because we didn't like the change. They weren't fitting into what we wanted, and that's what we said. That was one of the benefits of having discretionary. And we put you into the Fidelity Emerging Markets Index Fund until we find that right manager to fit there. So you don't get out of that exposure, but we were just done with that manager. So we chose to do that. Since inception, infrastructure, which has been a nice add-on that you put in there, has returned annualized 9.7%. And we're going to delve down a little bit. And then I think maybe in the next meeting or whenever we have, I don't think the actuary's been out here. So maybe get them out, do an actuarial review whenever you're ready for that. All right, let's turn to page 30. And we're going to talk a little bit about performance. So we look there, and we look on page 30, we look at Eaton Vance. It's done a great job for you. They have annualized 11.5 in the last 9 years versus 8.3. Even though they were a little bit under the mark, we look at them for the trailing 12 months. They're the ones who kind of protect you in a down market. Also, we have seen these small and mid caps, as I just talked about, have really been suffering from interest rates. The small and mid-cap companies, how do they grow? They borrow money, they expand. Borrowing money right now is more expensive there. Look at the global equity composite down there, and we can see that Dodge & Cox did 5.6 versus a market of 3%. Year to date, they're up 10% versus a market of 4.3. Then we go to Artisan Global and their performance, and I was just on an email about this. We all have as consultants. We have been going in and saying our clients, we've had our performance analysts come in. Artisan's actually coming in to meet with all of us at the end of August. We've asked for the whole portfolio management team to come in. When we go and look at the alternatives out there, most managers in this part of the market are really struggling. So do you dump one that we've liked for a long time, even though we've added them into you, or do you kind of wait? So what we're doing is we're kind of holding off a little bit. We're gonna see what the portfolio management team has to say to all of us. And we've also had our performance research on it. Head of research has been working on it about every week. We like that. And when we go and try and find a replacement for them, you say just put them in an index fund. Well, every one of their peers is doing exactly what they're doing on performance. So we're not ready to jump off the boat yet. Wellington was a different situation managed. We got rid of them. They had portfolio management change and they weren't working. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And then when we looked at them. So I just kind of wanted to make you aware of that there. When we look at MFS Global, for the trailing 12 months, they've done 12.7 versus 5.8, year to date, 8.1 versus 3.8. And then we go and look at the non-US composite, and we look at Harding Lover. Since we put them in January of last year, they were down 7.3 versus down 8.7. They've had a nice quarter, 3.4, year to date, 7.5. They're Hartford, Schroeder International Multi-Cap Value. Remember, we said value was a little out of favor, but they have still year-to-date done 8.2. Real estate, let's talk a little bit about real estate. Real estate last year did really well for you. What we did with real estate, and you have to remember, is that last year we went into real estate, we went into your real estate managers, and we said, look, we don't want to do dividend reinvestment anymore. We would like to see some of that income come off, so that helps, goes into the accounts and pays benefit payments. We did that across the board. Then what we did was last year, remember, equities were down double digits, fixed income were down double digits. So across the board, pension funds have to make benefit payments. You're not going to keep half your pension funds in cash. So managers went out and said, consultants, investment, said, okay, well, where do I pull from? I'm going to go pull for something that's got a gain. So we went in and asked for real estate to get some of that out. It has been a slow process. And with that, real estate has found, the real estate funds have found, you've got a ton coming out, they're gonna have to sell. And then we know the market has turned. They've had a dramatic change in the market. We know that within real estate, offices never got back. So they took a hit in 2020. They kind of took some of their free capital. They went into places like Amazon warehouses. Now we started to see that everybody's back out again in the real world kind of shopping. They've gone back into high-end retail, not high-end retail malls, but strip malls. Those are doing very well in real estate. So they're just kind of reshifted. We like them as a long term. We said 5 to 7%. Remember, we funded them with half of fixed income. Fixed income's done 2%. March 16th, you've had them, they've annualized 6%. They're doing exactly what we want them to do. We just know that the real estate market is just struggling right now. And we have kind of held off putting any more money into it until probably the end of this year. But it's a long term on that. We go look at infrastructure. Infrastructure has been very nice for you. It has been trailing 1 year's done 10.3 versus 6.1. And since you've had inception of last year, when last year was a negative year, you've annualized 9.7%.
Excuse me, can you explain infrastructure? Explain how is that money invested?
So infrastructure, if you go, well, you can just jump to the tab and we'll go. Infrastructure is through this mutual fund, through the JP Morgan, and then it also is a limited partnership. And what they do is they invest in companies that have exposure to infrastructure. So they'll invest in companies that are building divergence. They will invest in, and actually, let's go and find.
So it's not stocks in these companies, it's actual.
They'll invest in the companies and they'll also make a portfolio within the stocks of those companies. So if you go to, I just want to show you where we are. Okay, let's go to page 58. You can see what they're doing. So they put in the investments there, and they do invest in stocks, but they invest in stocks within companies there, so you can see where they're investing in. So the fund started in 2007. There are cash. They have 21 investments, so they can move all over the place. They've got a QN of about 476 million is ready to go in there, and you can see the investments that they're in. The top 10 fund investments.
Okay, I understand. I would expect with the federal dollars that are invested, that category should do well in the next several years. Is that
It
what you're
should,
expecting?
yes. And what we're also
Thanks.
expecting on infrastructure is that, we said, it's 7 to 10%. One of the things that when we looked at, all of, these portfolios is how do you de-risk them? Because we know equities and fixed income aren't really gonna get you there to that 7% in the next 10 years.
Right.
It's a very different environment. So infrastructure, even with the real estate, we did the defensive equity, have actually kind of de-risked the portfolio. We took some risk off the table and we were able to look at a better return going forward. Historically, that's based on historic returns.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then if we go back to, this will go back over here, fixed income. Okay, so let's get back to page 32, just really quickly. Defensive equity, we put in 2 years ago, and that was another one that we did. And that's interesting. That's got an index put right, and then we put them in parametric volatility risk premium. So 50% they take options out on the S&P 500 and 50% on the 91-day T-bill. All of it's covered. It's not unleveraged. They have done year-to-date 11.8 versus 9.5, and since inception, they've done 2.3 versus the market of 1.9. We go to fixed income. Again, the quarter is just a hard environment for fixed income, and I think this is what's so interesting. You are right on your index, your benchmark. Since February of 2014, fixed income's annualized 1.1%. You have to have it. There's got to be, you can't do all equity, you wouldn't do all fixed, but it's just a really hard place to be. So that was for some of the diversification. And just to finish up, if you go to page 34, you are all in with all of, having some very active managers. You're all in for 32 basis points, which is very low fee. I just did a finals presentation for a couple of municipalities, and they're at 70 basis points. And we've seen that across the board. So you're really in there. You're right where most of our county clients are. They're at 32 basis points. Are there any questions?
Any of the board members have questions or concerns for Sarah?
Yeah.
Well, as always, we appreciate you walking us through this document, and the fact that you've provided to us a couple days in advance gives us a chance to look it over. It's a public document, so anybody is certainly welcome to look at it. And we usually keep them on file in the commissioner's office, and I suspect our friends in the controller's office and treasurer's office probably do likewise. Again, Sarah, we greatly appreciate all the work you do for us, you and your colleagues. We move on to item 5, and Controller Prestipine has asked that we give some time for him to discuss the County Retirement Board's summary plan description. He's noting that it's in need of an update, and I believe you've done that.
Yes.
So I'm going to turn the meeting over to you, Mr. Prestipine, let you fill us in on what you'd like to share.
Okay, basically, I think we talked about this a couple of meetings ago. We went through the summary plan description because some of the stuff was outdated, needed clarified. I'll just go through real quick what we did here. There's not that much that we did. The first thing was The name of the actuary and the custodian was this, I think this initially was made in 2011. Some of the things have changed since then, so we just went through and put Hay Group is now Korn Ferry, our custodian is now US Bank. We did add Marquette Associates as the advisor on here just to update the vendors basically that we use for the retirement fund. On the first page of the plan highlights, it mentions on here, it says for 2011, the employee required contribution is 8% of your pay. That is true, but it just says for 2011, which is the year this was made. So we changed it to say for employees hired after January 1st, 1992, you're required to put 8% of pay, because that was when 8% was first initiated. So we just wanted to make sure that was clarified, that it wasn't just for 2011. There was a sentence on here that gave you your terms of when you can retire. I'm not sure why it had it on here like this, but it says you must have 5 years of service or attain age 60. It's actually, you can be age 60, you do not have to have 5 years of service. So we took that part out of there just to clarify. There was another sentence in here that said approximately 90 days before you intend to begin your pension, you should contact the county controller's office. We don't have any rule that says it has to be 90 days before you retire. You can call us whenever you have to call us. So we clarified that. Now on the refunds portion, this is the only thing that actually will probably change policy. When somebody has less than 5 years of service, when they terminate employment, quit or whatever, however they leave their employment, they have 2 options. They can either roll their money over or they can get a refund. We just put a stipulation on here that they have 90 days to contact our office with their decision or we're going to send the refund. Reason being, we have money there that's been sitting there forever. People aren't getting back to us, so we just wanted to put a stipulation on there as to when they have, as a time frame for them to get back to us. We did put 90 days in. That is something new that is in the plan summary. There's one other, maybe 2 more. There's one other clarification. Option 2, when you retire, is you get your pension, and if you pass away, your beneficiary then gets 100% of your pension. We just clarify that in order to put this option may not be valid for someone other than the spouse, because if your beneficiary, if the age disparity between you and your beneficiary is too large, you cannot pick that option depending on who the beneficiary is. So we just put that on there, that the option may not be valid for someone other than the spouse. If you put a child and your child's age disparity is too long, they don't get 100% of your pension for the entire time.
But if I'm hearing you correctly,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm going to be 64. Now let's assume, you all laugh at this, but if I married a 24-year-old,
Mhm.
that person became my spouse, then, and I die,
Right.
that person will still get
As a spouse.
as a spouse.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. I don't
You're
make plans
24
immediately to know. None that I'm aware of.
So I have to know where it is. Doesn't matter how old you are, you're gonna get my pension.
It was all hypothetical.
Okay, just.
Yeah, that's all I have. Most of it just clarification. The only thing that's actually changing this policy is the 90-day rule to get your refund rule.
Which is a good thing, because then it's not
Yes.
endless.
David, I wanna thank you and your staff. I assume your staff
Yes.
worked with you on this, so thank you for that. And Commissioner Burek, do you have a question?
It's funny you said that I was gonna ask about that. Is there anything in the law that clarifies that? Because you forwarded, you're gonna laugh at this too, but you forwarded to me the New Wilmington Globe newspaper. And I enjoy reading that very much. The last 1 or 2 editions, there was a story about a guy. He was the oldest participant that actually fought in the Civil War. And anyway, he was in his 80s when he was actually fighting in the Civil War, but it told his life story. And his first wife, he had 9 children with. And then when he was in his 50s, he remarried a 16-year-old girl and had 12 more children. But there was about a 40-year gap between he and his wife. And again, if somebody gets remarried with somebody much younger, that's a legitimate question. Then the county retirement fund is obligated then to pay, and they choose option 2. They would be obligated to pay that person out for all those additional years. Is there anything in the law that specifies about that?
I know there's part of it that specifies this 30 for someone other than a spouse. As far as if it's a spouse, I'm not positive on that.
So if somebody older does remarry somebody much younger, that could leave the fund on the hook for many, many additional decades, but that's a legitimate question. Not that would happen a lot, but it could
It's
happen.
possible.
It's always that hypothetical.
Yeah, that's true. Very interesting.
A question, when you send them the check if they don't pick,
Mhm.
do you send like a letter saying that this is taxable or?
Yeah, what we're going to do is when they get hired, we're going to give them a paper that they have to sign so they understand that. And then once they're gone, we're going to call them multiple times, send them letters, just to remind them during those 90 days, what's going to happen if they don't respond to us. And if they still choose to ignore us, then they're just gonna get the refund. But we're gonna make sure they understand it when they get hired, so they're gonna sign a paper, and then we're going to continue to remind them throughout those 90 days, so that they just don't get a check in the mail and don't know why.
Yeah, I work with another county that they leave after a year or 2 years and they just take it out. And they're all, I don't understand the tax cost. I mean, they have done everything they
Yes.
can,
Right.
you know, on your side you do, but it's just amazing how many just go, oh, throw in the bank.
Brian, do you have other questions for Mr. Prestipine?
No, I had brought up the last meeting that several things needed updated. I'm glad he addressed that and clarified about it. I agree that people shouldn't just leave that money sit there. We need to refund it, so I support the changes he recommended. The only thing I was disappointed, I went yesterday down to his office. I thought we were gonna vote and have the final document, but Stacy at his office explained, he sent us just the pages that have changes on it. The rest of it, that the formatting needed updated, but she said she's gonna retype the entire document and provide it to us. And I offered to, unless anybody objects, to proofread it as well as the controller's office before we then make it available to all county employees.
And I also wanted to make sure everybody was okay with
Yes,
everything
yes.
before we went and typed the whole thing up.
Right, no, I agree with the changes, so thank you for your office work.
Thank you. Melissa, any questions or concerns? Thank you. Commissioner Spielvogel?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. Well, David, again, appreciate all the work and time and effort you've put into this. Vanessa, what number would this resolution be?
This is the first one.
Oh, 2023.
Wow, jeez.
So this proposed resolution notes that the summary plan description has been reviewed and updated, and that the retirement board will take into account and consideration the attached updates and note that they have been made to the Lawrence County summary plan description. That's how the resolution is worded. And if there are no other concerns or questions, I could entertain a motion for consideration of this resolution.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I will second.
Commissioner Spielvogel seconds Controller Prestipine's motion. Further discussion or questions? Okay, thank you all. I'll ask Vanessa to call the roll.
Deputy Treasurer Chilella,
Yes.
Controller Prestipine,
Yes.
Commissioner Spielvogel.
Yes.
Commissioner Buick,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thanks, Vanessa. And once again, David, thank you very much
Thank you.
for your work on this. Before we move to conclude, I appreciate that Sarah referenced the actuary. Are you recommending that at our next board meeting, that individual attend, or at least attend virtually if necessary? Or I know you had some discussion with us about making that person available to employees who might have questions.
However we want to do it, but I mean, I can get in touch with Korn Ferry. I mean, it's end of year, so it might be, when is Rick's meeting?
It'll be roughly 3 months from now.
November or something.
Yeah, I think we said it, let's see. I think it's just important to have them come in, and then maybe then we can set a date.
I think it's the 14th.
14th is what I have
Okay.
as our next
Sure, I-
board meeting.
November 14th.
Yes, sir. Of course, that's a Tuesday. And then perhaps early afternoon, we could make that person available for employees who would wish to hear from him or her. If that's suitable for the members of the board. But I guess we wait to give you the opportunity to,
Reach out and then
Yeah,
I'll
let us
coordinate
know.
for everybody.
Let us know.
We'll definitely sit
Right.
there and see if they do the education, we can do that. If not, then, we can do the education first of the year, work with
I think
this
that's a good
year's
idea.
numbers.
Yeah.
So it's year-end numbers, but we can look at both of those, but I'll reach out
okay,
and see if they're available, or they can call in. Because I do think we haven't reviewed that report in a while,
right.
so it just makes sense.
Our friend Hank Stoll retired, didn't he? Oh, has it been that long? He was a nice man.
Before COVID.
Oh,
I think it was the year that we were
Probably 3 or 4
elected.
years ago.
Yeah, it was.
I always liked him. Do we have a name of a person that's doing what he does? What's his name?
Dave Rugby.
Okay, yeah, that rings a bell. Well, unless there are any objections, is the board okay with Sarah maybe trying to coordinate something that would tie in with our next regular meeting of this board? Are you folks all okay with that? Okay, well, thank you. Do we have a note for the record? There are no members of the public, but before we conclude, once again, we appreciate all you do for us, your ongoing professionalism, which we greatly value. I'll just go down the road here and see if my colleagues have any final concerns or comments. Commissioner Steele.
Nothing, thank you.
Controller Preston. Deputy Treasurer Chawla. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Bureau.
Just one quick comment. I'd just be interested, I'm speaking to a gentleman at the CCAP conference. I knew him for many years ago and I have a lot of respect for him. He's now with Birch Run Investments. And he said that in one county where you're the advisor, they recently did take a small percentage. You're moving some funds around. I'd be interested in learning more about Birch Run Investments and if at any point you feel they might benefit our portfolio, if they become one of the companies that we worked with. So just gather information. As a retirement board, we should always review all of our options. And I agree with what she's done, what Marquette's done with putting us more defensive in the last several years, moving into real estate. We've done a lot of good things, but we have to always continue to look at all the options so we do our best to fulfill our fiduciary responsibility. So
Appreciate that. Thank you.
thanks.
Before I forget, and just off the top of your head, I wouldn't expect you to have the precise amount. Are we at the 100% funded level? Are we slightly above, slightly below, or?
Slightly.
Okay, good. That's a good place to be. Okay, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Well, there being no other business to be brought before this board, I would request a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for adjournment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed, the same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. And then somebody has to turn off the.
What's that?
Can I get a copy of the plan documents done?
Yeah.
That'd be great, just so I can.
Yeah, I'll get it.
So the person 20 years from now looking for it.
Are you okay?
Brian to the rescue.
I remember trying to track some of them down.
If I touched it, it would blow up. Yeah.
I'll get you.
Thanks so much for
Yeah.
that. Sorry.